um, some of the companies, a lot of the companies we own started doing not just good, but like very well. And, and some of the side effects of like stimulus money coming in and then people having, um, unleveraged balance sheets, right? Like with the 08, 09 recession, people were over, there was a lot of consumer debt. There was a lot of mortgages, houses that were underwater. People were so leveraged that savings rates increased. People stopped spending money and they were hurting, right? Their wallets were hurting. The balance sheets were hurting. This time, you can spend the money, right? Like you can't go out, you can't do anything, and so that combined with the stimulus to support people that obviously were unemployed, but even people that were not unemployed obviously got checks. Um, we just started seeing these crazy tailwinds in a number of industries that we have to invest in, and certain companies. Oh, and sorry, and the whole work from home thing as well, right? Like certain areas you can't go to restaurants, you can't go to, you can't do certain things, but you can do outdoor recreation now because you're trying to get out of the house. You can work from home, so you could do, I don't know, like for example, one of my cousins down in Texas, they bought a tent to go camping in their backyard. Like they're so bored of staying home. They were buying puzzles, right? They were buying toys. They were doing crafting. They're doing all these things that they couldn't do stuff outside the house. And so, we've happened to have made investments in certain areas that are enthusiast areas as part of our thesis. So outdoor recreation, hobbies, things like that, where you have like a loyal, sticky consumer base. And these companies' sales were up 20, 30%. I mean, one of our company's sales were up 90%. Um, and so we went from this panic mode of like, survival, cash flow preservation to these incredible like tailwinds across some companies. Now, certain companies, obviously hurt. We have one restaurant chain, it made it through and it's, obviously doing well now with reopening. We have a gym chain that I mentioned that hurt because it was just literally shut down. And it depends on the state, obviously different state, different politics, different regulations. But overall, obviously, it was not good to be in a gym chain. But coming out of it now, I'd say the last few months, sales at the gym chain versus 2019, pre-COVID sales were up 10, 20%. People are crowding back in because they miss, they've been cooped up. And so, yeah, interestingly, there's that's kind of been the ride in terms of like the companies we've been invested in. In terms of companies we're seeing in the M&A market coming, in terms of new opportunities. Um, it's also really interesting. There are companies that have done that have benefited, as you can say, intuitively from what I just said. So we're seeing a lot of like home goods companies, home goods, crafts around the house, again, outdoor recreation, things that did well from working from home, where people spent stimulus money and money they couldn't spend out, in services and outside the house they spend on certain types of goods. We're seeing a lot of these companies, arts, crafts, supplements, like in the health industry, we're seeing a lot of activity because people were focused on their health and immunity. So a lot of supplement companies got a big boost. Certain areas that everyone on the call can intuitively just think, hey, what do my family do? What do they spend their money on? What do our friends do? From that, you could extrapolate. Those are the companies we're seeing. We're seeing a flood of companies in those areas. Stimulus money helped, the economic recovery helped, people can spend money on other stuff. Certain areas got really benefited. Certain areas that obviously got hurt we're not seeing as much. There's, in the recovery phase. So, you think services, you think like restaurants, you think gyms, um, things like that. But it's an interesting time for us because there's a huge influx of potential transactions and companies that are looking for it to sell because they had this big, in certain sectors, they had this big 2020, early 2021 based on the factors that I mentioned. But, as investors, we're looking at it and we're like, well, is this sustainable? Is this something that's going to last, reopening? Or, I'll tell you, we've got like fitness equipment businesses, like incredible, ridiculous P&L stories. EBITDA increasing by 300 to 500%, in COVID. And, they'll make an argument that, it's a permanent shift to some extent. There's some people that realize they can work out at home and that they would rather not be in a gym and not be crowded with all these people. But when you're on the cusp of reopening and people are excited to get out of the house, it's hard to figure out, well, what is your valuation? How do you value a company like that? Is it going to go back to the pre-COVID normal? Is it going to go to a new normal? It's definitely not going to be where it was last 12 months. So these are some of the things we're struggling